Alright, so we just did this mole ratio. Now we're going to talk about some mole-to-mole conversions. So this is where it's going to start getting a little bit trickier. Alright, today we're going to be learning this, and then next time you're actually going to even learn something a little bit harder. So it's important that we get this down so we can kind of learn our next thing either the end of this week or next week, depending on what class you have me in. So we're going to start talking about mole-to-mole conversions. And so we're going to start doing a little bit of math to be able to figure out some of these chemical problems. And basically the point of being able to do these conversions is that when we are doing chemistry and making things and stuff like that, we're not always just doing it like this chemical equation. You know, that'd be really small, that wouldn't be enough. Lots of times we're using bigger numbers. And so we're going to use this chemical equation to be able to figure out, you know, how many starting materials we need, how many ending materials we're going to get, things like that. For our actual chemical reactions that we're doing, not just for, you know, a very basic, simple, small reaction. We're going to start talking about larger reactions, doing this, but on a larger scale. So I have a couple example problems. We'll see how we feel after these problems. If you still need some more help, shoot me an email and I can even record another video with more practice problems, okay? But we're going to start with these ones and see how we feel. So on your homework or things like that, I'll give you the equation. Sometimes you have to balance it, sometimes I'll give it to you balanced. And I'm going to ask you a question. So these are kind of a couple different questions that I could ask you. It says, if we have 8 moles of Ag, how many moles of Mg will we get? And so you'll see here why it's called mole-to-mole conversion is because we're converting from, you know, moles of Ag going to moles of Mg. So like I said, we're going to start doing some math. It's going to look a little bit complicated, but we will get through it. It will be okay. So for these problems, you always want to look at what you're starting with. 8 moles of Ag is what we're starting with. So we're going to write that on this side of your paper. Alright, now we know eventually we are wanting to get to having moles of Mg. That is what we want to get in the end. So we're going to do some math in between here to get to the moles of Mg at the end. So we're going to start with this. We're going to do some math to try to get to this. All right, so I'll show you kind of how we're going to do the math. So we have 8 moles of Ag starting. Now we're going to have to go back and do some of these different mole ratios to give us this moles of Mg. So if we are trying to get from moles of Ag to moles of Mg, let's look at the two different kinds of ratios that we could have. So the first ratio that we could have, I'm going to write it down here, is we could have 2 moles of Ag for every 3 moles of Mg. That's one ratio you can have that we could use. Or we could use the other ratio, 3 moles of Mg over 2 moles of Ag. Now, how to decide which one of these we're going to use, we have to be able to plug it into our equation here and multiply it by this to get this at the end. So the important thing with this stoichiometry that we're going to be doing is that when we plug in a fraction here, the top of this one and the bottom of this one are going to cancel each other out. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So don't write this down right now. Just watch for a second and then I'll have you write it down, okay? So, for example, if we put this one in here and we were to multiply these two together, you'll see that this top, the moles of Ag and the moles of Mg, we can't cancel them out. They're not the same thing. They don't say the same thing. So we wouldn't want to use this fraction because this top and this bottom can't cancel each other out. Alright, so let's look now if we use the other one. If we use this and we put it up in there, you'll notice when we use this one, we have 8 moles of Ag on top and we have 2 moles of Ag on the bottom. So this unit, this mole of Ag, can cancel each other out because they're on top and on bottom. And so that's how you decide what you want to put in here is depending on what can cancel out. You always want to cancel out this so that you're left with, see how we want to be left with moles of Mg? We want to leave that on the top because that is our ending thing that we want. So always use the fraction that's going to have the moles of Ag or, you know, the moles of whatever your starting material is on the opposite top and bottom. All right, so we got that. We have 8 moles of Ag. and we're using this fraction, and we're going to times. So to do that, again, we're going to be crossing this out. So we're going to have these units are going to cancel out. So our ending units are going to be moles of mg, which is nice because we know that was what we wanted to end with. We wanted to get moles of mg. So that's going to be our ending unit is going to be moles of mg. All right, now we need to figure out how many moles of mg we have. So this is just like basic math that you've done before. It's going to be multiplication by a fraction. So you'll multiply and then you divide by this number. Or you can, divide and then multiply this by this number. So on your calculator, I would probably write in 8 times 3 and then divide that number by 2. So 8 times 3 is 24. You divide it by 2. And so your answer will be 12. 12 moles of mg. All right, you might want to go back and rewatch that explanation if you're still confused. We're going to do a different one. Hopefully that helps you feel less confused. And like I said, if after this you're still super confused, shoot me an email. I can do some more practice problems for you guys, okay? All right, so we're going to look at this equation down here. You can take a second, pause the video, write it down. But we're going to be talking about if we want 10 moles of P2O3, how many moles of O2 should we start with? So we're saying we want this amount at the end. This amount after our chemical reaction has happened, that's how much we want. But how much do we need to start with? That is our question. So to start off, I would always start with the thing I'm given. So I have 10 moles of P2O3. That is what I'm given. That's what I'm starting with. And I know in the end here that I want to get to having moles of O2. So since this is my starting and this is my ending, I know my mole ratio. I want to be using moles of P2O3 and moles of O2. So my two options for the mole ratio would either be 2 moles of P2O3 all over 3 moles of O2, or it could be 3 moles of O2 all over 2 moles of P2O3. All right, those are the two different mole ratios that I'll be using to try to go from this to this. So think in your head really fast, which one do you think I'm going to put in here to multiply by this to give me this? Remember, we're going to cross out our units on top and on bottom with each other. So you want this unit that's on top here to be on bottom of our fraction. So hopefully you picked right, and you said that we want this one in there, because you'll see if we throw that one in there, then we get our units canceling out, so we're left with just moles of O2, which is what we want, and then we can do this math here. So again, to do the math here, first let's actually cancel out this. So we cancel that out, so we know we're left with moles of O2. All right, that probably looks kind of confusing. Let me erase it. I'll write it again. So we know that our units that we're left with is this top part because everything else canceled out. So we're left with moles of O2 as our product. So now we need to figure out the math part of it. So remember, we multiply these ones together. We divide by this one. So 10 times 3 gives us 30. Divide it by 2, and we get 15 moles of O2. All right, I'm kind of running out of time tonight, so that's all we're going to do. Like I said, please email me if you need a deeper explanation when you're starting your homework and it gets confusing, okay? Good luck.